Dakota Territory, August 1879. While his neighbors rushed to finish standard log cabins before winter, former schoolteacher Elias Hartman was still measuring temperatures with his mercury thermometers, planning to build his bed directly into the corner beside his stone chimney mass. His neighbors called it wasteful. They called him a fool. Why waste corner space on a sleeping alcove when any wall would do for a simple bedstead? Then the hard winter of 1880 to 1881 struck. October blizzards followed by months of sub-zero cold that tested every heating system on the northern plains. Standard beds against exterior walls dropped to the high 30s. Families burned furniture to stay alive. But Hartman's corner position maintained 60 to 62 degrees while burning one-third the wood of his neighbors' fires. What did this schoolteacher understand about heat and airflow that 2 centuries of frontier cabin wisdom had completely missed? Elias R. Hartman stepped off the freight wagon at the Big Sioux River crossing on August 12, 1879, carrying a carpenter's chest, 2 mercury and glass thermometers wrapped in cloth, and the measured confidence of a man who had spent 6 years teaching mathematics and natural philosophy to farm children in Lynn County, Iowa. At 34, he possessed the rare combination of practical building skills and scientific curiosity that frontier life demanded but seldom rewarded. His homestead claim stretched across a gentle ridge where the prevailing winter winds would cut directly across any structure, a detail he had noted during his initial survey of the quarter section. The cabin he raised that September measured 16 feet by 18 feet, constructed from hewn logs with a field stone and brick chimney anchored to the east wall. Unlike his neighbors who positioned their fireplace openings dead center for symmetry, Hartman deliberately set his slightly off-center, creating an asymmetrical interior that puzzled visitors but served his developing plan. He oriented the single door on the south wall directly in the path of those winter winds, a choice that seemed counterintuitive until he explained his reasoning to Owen McKendry, who was raising a similar cabin 300 yards downslope. "The door faces the weather for a reason," Hartman told McKendry as they chinked gaps between logs with clay and moss. "I want to see exactly how the cold air moves through the room." McKendry, a practical man who had built 2 cabins in Kansas before pushing north into Dakota Territory, shook his head at such deliberate exposure to the elements. Standard practice called for positioning doors away from prevailing winds, not toward them. Hartman's true innovation lay not in the cabin's basic construction, but in his rejection of conventional sleeping arrangements. Where frontier wisdom dictated placing a bedstead against any available wall or tucking it under a loft for space efficiency, Hartman planned something unprecedented: a built-in sleeping alcove integrated directly into the rear face of the chimney mass. The concept drew from his memories of visiting German immigrants in eastern Iowa, families who had constructed enclosed beds that trapped warmth and blocked drafts, though he intended to apply the principle with American materials and his own measurements. His reasoning centered on a phenomenon he had observed during his teaching years but never fully tested: the way stone and brick structures radiated heat long after direct flame contact ended. In the schoolhouse, children sitting near the large brick stove remained comfortable even when those across the room shivered, despite identical air temperatures measured at desk height. Hartman suspected that the warmth came not from the heated air but from the stove's surface radiating directly to nearby bodies, a principle he called thermal throw, though modern building science would term it mean radiant temperature. Owen McKendry's reaction was swift and dismissive. "A teacher's gadgets won't heat a cabin," he declared, watching Hartman carefully position his thermometers at various heights around the single room. "Sleep where you drop, burn more wood, and quit measuring the air." McKendry had survived 3 hard winters on the Kansas frontier, using nothing more sophisticated than an axe, a strong back, and willingness to feed his fireplace through the night when temperatures dropped. Silas Boone, who was completing a larger 18 by 20-foot cabin nearby, shared McKendry's skepticism but expressed it more directly. "Why dig a cellar for your bed when a rope frame against any wall works fine?" he asked, misunderstanding Hartman's plan to elevate the sleeping platform rather than excavate below it. Boone had positioned his own bedstead along the north wall where it would be shielded from the door's draft, but directly against logs that would be cold-soaked by exterior air throughout the winter months. Betsy Fjellstad offered the sharpest criticism during one of her daily walks past the construction site. Carrying a water bucket from the creek, she paused to observe Hartman taking temperature readings at different locations within his cabin frame. "When the mercury's stiff, any corner feels the same," she said dryly, her Scandinavian accent lending authority to her dismissal of his measurements. Her own family kept a trundle bed near their west window, prioritizing floor space for their growing household over any theoretical advantages of positioning. Hartman absorbed their criticism while developing his technical understanding through systematic observation. He hung one thermometer near the proposed alcove location and another at the room's center, both at 24 inches above the floor, roughly chest height for a sleeping person. Even during mild September evenings, when he built small fires for cooking, the readings showed consistent patterns. The area adjacent to the chimney mass registered temperatures 3 to 5 degrees higher than the room's center, evidence that the stone was absorbing and re-radiating heat as he had theorized. The sleeping alcove itself would be constructed from 1-inch pine planks, forming 3 walls around a raised platform, with the fourth side opening to the room but positioned away from the door's direct line. Hartman planned to lag screw a sturdy cleat into the chimney breast to anchor a headboard that would stand 2 inches off the masonry surface, close enough to receive radiant warmth but far enough to prevent scorching. The entire assembly would elevate the sleeping surface 18 inches above the floor, lifting the occupant out of the cold air that would pool at ground level during winter nights. His neighbors completed their cabins using time-tested methods. McKendry positioned his rope bed near the loft ladder for easy access. Boone placed his bedstead flush against the north wall, and the Fjellstads kept their trundle where it could be pushed under a larger bed during daytime hours. Each arrangement followed frontier logic of maximizing space efficiency, while assuming that adequate firewood could overcome any positioning disadvantages. As October approached and first frost warnings circulated among the scattered homesteads, Hartman continued his temperature logging while constructing the alcove frame. His evening readings consistently showed the chimney-adjacent area maintaining warmth longer than other locations, even after fires died to coals. The data reinforced his conviction that thermal mass and radiant heat transfer would prove more valuable than simply burning larger quantities of fuel, a theory that would face its ultimate test when winter's full fury arrived on the northern plains. Hartman's first sleeping arrangement proved disastrously wrong, a humbling lesson that nearly derailed his entire theory before winter's true test arrived. In early November of 1879, he completed his initial alcove construction by positioning the bed frame tight against the north exterior wall, assuming that any interior location would benefit from the nearby chimney's warmth. The platform stood 18 inches off the floor as planned, but he had fundamentally misunderstood which heat sources mattered most for a sleeping body's comfort. 3 consecutive nights of temperature logging revealed the flaw in stark numerical terms. His primary thermometer, hung 24 inches above the mattress edge at pillow height, bottomed out at 41 to 43 degrees Fahrenheit during the coldest pre-dawn hours. Meanwhile, his second instrument, stationed near the chimney mass, consistently read 56 to 58 degrees, a differential of 14 to 18 degrees that persisted even when both locations shared identical air circulation patterns. The problem lay in a phenomenon Hartman had never considered: radiant heat exchange between his body and the surrounding surfaces. While he slept, his skin temperature of roughly 98 degrees constantly radiated warmth toward any nearby surface. The interior face of the north wall, chilled by exterior air that often dropped below freezing, acted like a heat sink that literally pulled warmth from his body throughout the night. No amount of quilts or blankets could prevent this invisible drain, since radiant exchange occurred through any air gap between sleeper and wall. Hartman documented this discovery through a systematic approach that would later inform building science principles. He positioned both thermometers at identical heights and distances from the floor, eliminating variables that might skew his readings. Every 15 minutes throughout 3 November nights, he recorded temperatures at both locations, creating a detailed log of how different surfaces affected the thermal environment around a sleeping person. The data showed that air temperature alone provided an incomplete picture of human comfort. The temperature of nearby surfaces proved equally critical. The solution required relocating the entire sleeping arrangement to exploit thermal mass rather than fight cold surfaces. Hartman identified the corner diagonally opposite the fireplace opening but directly adjacent to the chimney stack as the optimal position. This location offered two advantages: proximity to the warmed masonry that would radiate heat for hours after the fire died, and maximum distance from the door's draft patterns that pulled cold air across the room's lower levels. Dismantling his first attempt, Hartman rebuilt the alcove using more sophisticated construction techniques. He lag-screwed a 1 1/2 inch oak cleat directly into the chimney breast, providing a secure anchor point for a headboard that would stand exactly 2 inches off the masonry surface. This gap prevented scorching while allowing the sleeper to see the warm stone radiatively, a positioning that required precise measurement to achieve the correct thermal exchange. The most crucial innovation involved constructing a 48-inch high windbreak from 1 by 12 planed pine boards, positioned on the bed's doorward side to deflect cold air currents. Hartman had observed that even slight air movement across a sleeping person dramatically increased heat loss through convection, the same principle that made still air feel warmer than breezy conditions at identical temperatures. The windbreak created a pocket of calm air around the sleeper while directing door drafts toward the fireplace, where they would be heated and circulated upward. Installation of this barrier required careful joinery to ensure stability without interfering with room circulation. Hartman mortised the pine boards into a 2x4 frame that anchored securely to both the floor sill and the chimney breast, creating a solid partition that would not shift or gap under pressure from air currents. The finished windbreak stood as tall as a seated person, high enough to shelter the sleeper's entire body, while maintaining visual connection to the rest of the room. After completing these modifications, Hartman repeated his temperature logging protocol for 7 consecutive nights in late November, when exterior temperatures dropped consistently below freezing. The results validated his corrections dramatically. His pillow height thermometer now registered nightly lows of 60 to 62 degrees Fahrenheit, even on nights when the room's center air temperature fell to 42 to 45 degrees. The chimney-adjacent corner maintained a 20-degree advantage over mid-room conditions, proof that thermal mass and wind protection mattered more than simply generating heated air. The final refinement involved addressing air circulation within the alcove itself. Hartman stitched a simple curtain valance from heavy canvas, designed to hang from a wooden strip mounted along the windbreak's upper edge. This curtain could be drawn partially across the alcove opening during the coldest nights, creating an enclosed sleeping space that trapped warm air while preventing stagnation. The concept borrowed from European enclosed bed traditions, but adapted them using American frontier materials and construction methods. Fuel consumption data provided additional evidence of the system's efficiency. During his initial failed arrangement, Hartman had burned 3 to 4 armloads of split oak each night to maintain barely tolerable sleeping conditions. After relocating to the chimney corner with proper wind protection, 2 evening charges of seasoned wood kept the alcove comfortable until dawn, with the chimney's thermal mass maintaining surface temperatures of 90 to 105 degrees for hours after the last flames died. His neighbors, meanwhile, struggled with conventional arrangements that ignored both radiant exchange and air movement patterns. McKendry's rope bed beside the door remained in the direct path of infiltrating cold air, requiring constant fire feeding throughout the night. Boone's north wall position suffered from the same cold surface problems that had plagued Hartman's first attempt, leading to damp quilts and restless sleep as body heat transferred continuously to chilled logs. By December's arrival, Hartman had refined his alcove into a precisely engineered microclimate that maintained warmth through thermal mass storage, radiant positioning, and wind control. His temperature logs showed consistent performance even as exterior conditions grew harsher, setting the stage for the ultimate test that winter would bring to every heating system on the northern plains. The systematic approach of measurement, analysis, and correction had transformed a failed experiment into a repeatable method that challenged 2 centuries of conventional frontier sleeping arrangements. Word of Hartman's modified sleeping arrangement spread along the freight trails and creek bottom paths that connected the scattered homesteads, generating reactions that split the small community into distinct camps. Owen McKendry doubled down on his opposition, declaring to anyone within earshot that you'll smother yourself in that cupboard bed, a concern rooted in his experience with poorly ventilated root cellars, where trapped air had proven dangerous. His own rope bed remained positioned under the loft ladder near the door, a location he defended as providing quick access to the outdoors in case of fire or other emergency. Silas Boone maintained his skepticism through a different lens, insisting that numbers don't warm bones, while keeping his larger bedstead flush against the north wall where it had always been. His resistance stemmed from a practical philosophy that had served him through 3 frontier relocations. Simple solutions that worked quickly were superior to complicated arrangements that required measurement and adjustment. The idea of repositioning furniture based on thermometer readings struck him as impractical refinement that ignored the basic truth that adequate firewood could solve any heating problem. Betsy Fjellstad's attitude began shifting as December approached, and her baby developed a pattern of waking before dawn with cold, stiffened limbs. She started appearing at Hartman's cabin during his evening temperature recordings, asking pointed questions about where he positioned his instruments and how consistently the readings varied between locations. Her Scandinavian background included familiarity with enclosed sleeping spaces, but she had never seen the concept applied with systematic measurement to determine optimal placement within a room's thermal landscape. Amos Toll emerged as the most thoughtful observer among Hartman's neighbors, spending an entire afternoon standing in the schoolteacher's doorway to feel how cold air moved through the single-room space. A widower who had learned to notice details that affected domestic comfort, Toll detected the steady pull of air from door to fireplace, a current that would drag cold drafts directly across any bed positioned in the flow path. "There's a lesson blowing through here," he announced after completing his investigation. The first acknowledgement from any neighbor that Hartman might have identified genuine principles rather than mere novelty. Hartman's reasoning crystallized through these interactions into a systematic understanding of indoor air dynamics that went far beyond his initial focus on radiant heat. Doors and gaps drove cold air into cabins through what he termed pressure differences, creating invisible rivers of chilled air that flowed along predictable paths toward heat sources. Any sleeping space positioned within these draft corridors would subject its occupant to constant convective cooling, regardless of air temperature measured at mid-room locations distant from the flow patterns. Cold exterior walls presented a separate but equally significant challenge through their effect on what Hartman now called operative temperature. The combined influence of air temperature and surface temperatures that determined human comfort. A person sleeping near a cold interior surface would lose body heat through radiation, even when surrounded by warm air, creating a thermal environment that felt substantially colder than thermometer readings suggested. Understanding both phenomena allowed him to position his alcove where it would benefit from warm surfaces while avoiding cold air currents. The final construction phase consumed 8 intensive days in late November, as Hartman assembled his refined design using carefully calculated materials. He required 6 1x12 pine planks at 8-foot lengths for the windbreak and side panels, plus additional lumber for the elevated platform that would support a standard straw tick mattress. The platform itself measured 54 inches wide by 72 inches long, dimensions that provided adequate sleeping space while fitting precisely into the chimney corner without extending into the room's traffic pattern. Critical to the design was maintaining exact spacing between the headboard and chimney face, a gap that Hartman fine-tuned through trial positioning with a candle flame held at various distances from the masonry. Too close, and the sleeper risked burns from stones heated by strong fires. Too distant, and the radiant benefit diminished below useful levels. The final 2-inch separation provided optimal heat transfer, while ensuring safety even during the coldest nights when fires burned hottest and longest. Installation of the removable upper panel represented Hartman's most sophisticated innovation, addressing the need for variable enclosure based on weather conditions. Using tongue and groove joinery that he had learned during his teaching years when helping maintain the schoolhouse, he crafted a panel that could slide into grooves cut along the alcove's upper edges. During mild weather, The panel remained stored beneath the platform. During severe cold or wind, it could be positioned to create a nearly enclosed sleeping chamber that trapped body heat while maintaining adequate ventilation through carefully sized gaps. The panel system required precise measurement to achieve proper fit without binding or warping under humidity changes. Hartman planed each edge to tolerances of less than 1/8 inch, ensuring smooth operation while maintaining weather-tight sealing when closed. Small finger holes drilled near the panel's center provided grip points for easy manipulation, while chamfered edges prevented jamming during installation or removal in dim firelight conditions. Meanwhile, his neighbors completed their cabins using conventional arrangements that prioritized speed and familiarity over thermal optimization. McKendry's 14 by 16-foot space included a simple rope bed beside the door and a storage loft accessible by fixed ladder, an efficient layout that maximized floor area while following standard frontier practice. Boone's larger 18 by 20-foot cabin incorporated his bedstead along the north wall with space for a trundle bed that could accommodate visiting family members during settlement gatherings. The Fjellstads arranged their single room around a trundle bed positioned near the west window, where it received afternoon light while remaining out of the main traffic flow between door and fireplace. Their layout emphasized domestic efficiency for a growing family, with the bed's wheeled construction allowing it to be moved aside during daytime activities that required additional floor space for children's play and household work. By the first week of December, Hartman had completed his system with final adjustments that included installing split sapling slats to support the straw tick mattress and adding leather hinges to the removable panel for smoother operation. His evening fuel consumption had stabilized at 2 small charges of seasoned oak, significantly less than the 3 to 4 armloads required by his neighbors to maintain comparable comfort levels. Temperature logs showed consistent performance with nightly lows of 58 to 62 degrees at pillow height, even as exterior conditions grew progressively harsher. The completed alcove represented more than innovative furniture arrangement. It embodied a systematic approach to indoor climate control that challenged frontier assumptions about heating efficiency and human comfort. As December deepened and weather patterns grew more severe, Hartman's measured method would face its ultimate validation against the conventional wisdom that had guided homestead construction across the northern plains for decades. The hard winter of 1880 to 1881 announced itself with unprecedented fury, beginning with a massive blizzard that struck Dakota territory on October 15th through 18th, 1880, followed by relentless cold that would test every heating system across the northern plains until the following April. Weather records from military posts and railroad stations documented temperatures that ran anomalously low for months, creating survival conditions that separated effective building methods from mere tradition. The first major test arrived during a December cold snap when Hartman's outdoor thermometer registered 18 degrees below zero at dawn, while his indoor measurements revealed the true performance differences between various sleeping arrangements. His alcove, positioned beside the thermal mass of the chimney, maintained 60 to 61 degrees Fahrenheit at pillow height throughout the night after a single evening fire, while his control thermometer in the room's center dropped to 36 to 38 degrees by morning. McKendry's conventional bed placement beside the door proved disastrously vulnerable to what building science terms stack effect, the pressure-driven movement of air through a structure caused by temperature differences between inside and outside air. Cold exterior air, being denser than heated interior air, created positive pressure at the cabin's lower levels, forcing frigid drafts through every gap around the doorframe and pushing them directly across McKendry's sleeping space. His pillow height temperatures plummeted to the high 30s, despite maintaining a heavy fire throughout the night, demonstrating how air infiltration could overwhelm even generous fuel consumption. Silas Boone discovered a different but equally problematic phenomenon when his north wall sleeping arrangement began producing soaked quilts and bedding that froze stiff by morning. The issue stemmed from dew point depression, the temperature at which water vapor in warm interior air condenses into liquid upon contact with cold surfaces. Boone's body heat and respiration generated moisture-laden air that immediately condensed when it touched the interior face of logs chilled by exterior temperatures below zero. This condensation then froze against the wood, creating ice buildup that made his bedstead uninhabitable without constant repositioning of damp textiles. The Fjellstad family faced the most dangerous situation when their trundle beds positioned near the west window exposed their infant to lethal cold drafts. Stack effect infiltration occurred most dramatically at the cabin's lowest points, where cold air entered through gaps and cracks while warm air escaped through higher openings near the roof line. The baby's sleeping space, positioned at floor level directly in this cold airflow, experienced temperature drops that caused the child to wake crying as hypothermic conditions developed rapidly during the coldest pre-dawn hours. Hartman's systematic documentation during the January siege provided precise data on these comparative failures. On one particularly severe night when exterior temperatures reached 18 below zero, his measurements revealed stark contrasts. His own pillow registered 60 to 61 degrees, McKendry's dropped to 38 to 40 degrees, and Boone's measured 41 to 43 degrees. More critically, Hartman's wood consumption remained at his established 2 evening armloads, approximately 15 to 18 pounds of split oak, while his neighbors burned twice that quantity to achieve their inadequate results. The superior performance of Hartman's alcove derived from its systematic avoidance of the 3 primary heat loss mechanisms that plagued conventional arrangements. First, positioning beside the chimney mass eliminated radiant heat loss to cold surfaces, instead allowing the sleeper to gain warmth from masonry that maintained temperatures of 90 to 105 degrees for hours after fires died to coals. Second, the elevated platform and windbreak system removed the sleeping space from cold air infiltration patterns that swept along the floor toward the fireplace. Third, the optional upper panel created variable enclosure that trapped body-warmed air during the severest conditions while preventing the moisture buildup that caused condensation problems in fully sealed spaces. During a particularly brutal stretch in late January, when exterior temperatures remained below zero for 6 consecutive days, the thermal mass principles that Hartman had identified proved their value through sustained performance. Stone and brick possess what engineers call thermal inertia, the ability to absorb large quantities of heat energy and release it slowly over extended periods. Each evening's fire charged the chimney mass with stored energy that continued radiating warmth throughout the night and into the following morning, creating a thermal reservoir that buffered the sleeping space against exterior temperature swings. McKendry's struggles intensified as he attempted to compensate for his vulnerable doorside position by feeding his fireplace continuously through the night. This approach not only consumed excessive fuel, but created dangerous conditions when unattended fires either died unexpectedly or burned too hot, risking chimney fires or carbon monoxide accumulation in the tightly sealed cabin. His woodpile, which should have lasted through February, diminished rapidly as he burned 3 to 4 times Hartman's nightly consumption without achieving comparable comfort. Boone's condensation problems escalated during temperature fluctuations when brief warming periods were followed by rapid refreezing. The ice buildup against his north wall created a thermal bridge that conducted cold directly through the log structure, while the constant moisture cycle began promoting rot in the chinking materials between logs. His bedstead became surrounded by frozen puddles that made nighttime movement treacherous, forcing him to consider relocating his sleeping space despite the major construction work required. The crisis reached its peak during a thaw-refreeze cycle in early March, when many families had exhausted their prepared fuel supplies and were forced to burn furniture, tool handles, and even structural elements of their cabins to maintain life-sustaining heat. Hartman's efficient system allowed him to continue with minimal consumption while his thermal mass continued performing reliably, but his neighbors faced increasingly desperate situations as their conventional methods failed under sustained stress. Temperature logging during 3 consecutive blizzard nights provided definitive evidence of the different systems' capabilities under extreme conditions. Hartman's alcove never dropped below 58 degrees at pillow height, while maintaining this comfort level with fuel consumption that remained within sustainable limits. His neighbors' conventional arrangements not only failed to provide adequate warmth, but required unsustainable resource expenditure that threatened their long-term survival prospects. The data convinced even the most stubborn skeptics that Hartman had identified genuine physical principles rather than mere preference or convenience. Mean radiant temperature, stack effect air movement, and thermal mass storage were not theoretical concepts, but measurable phenomena that directly affected human survival during the extreme conditions that frontier life regularly imposed. The hard winter had provided the definitive test that separated effective building science from traditional guesswork, validating systematic measurement and design over inherited assumptions about heating and comfort. When April's thaw finally released Dakota Territory from the hard winter's grip in 1881, Amos Tull arrived at Hartman's cabin before the last snow patches had melted, carrying carpenter's tools and a request that would initiate the systematic spread of the warm corner method across the northern plains. "Show me how to read that corner," Tull said simply, acknowledging that survival trumped pride in frontier communities where effective techniques meant the difference between life and death during the next winter season. Hartman's teaching approach proved as methodical as his original research, beginning with a diagnostic technique that any homesteader could master using basic materials. He instructed Tull to hang 2 mercury thermometers at precisely 24 inches above floor level, one at the proposed sleeping location, another at the room's geometric center, then build a standard evening fire and record readings every 30 minutes until dawn. This mapping process revealed each cabin's unique thermal landscape, showing how architectural features like chimney placement, door position, and window location created specific patterns of heat distribution and air movement. The retrofitting process required structural modifications that went beyond simple furniture rearrangement, demanding carpentry skills that tested the limits of frontier tool availability. Hartman developed a standardized approach for anchoring windbreaks and headboards to existing chimney masses, using techniques that worked with various masonry styles found across Dakota Territory. For chimneys built with fieldstone and clay mortar, he recommended drilling anchor holes with a star drill and hammer, then securing oak cleats with iron pins driven flush to the masonry surface. For brick chimneys with lime mortar, he specified different drilling patterns that avoided joint lines where cracking might compromise the entire structure. Platform elevation posed complex challenges in cabins where floor joists ran perpendicular to the desired sleeping orientation, requiring creative solutions that Hartman refined through multiple installations. He developed a cantilever system using doubled 2x6 beams lag-screwed directly into wall plates, creating a self-supporting platform that transferred weight to the cabin's structural frame rather than relying on floor-mounted legs that could shift or sink. This approach proved especially valuable in cabins with uneven puncheon floors where traditional bed frames wobbled or rocked during use. The Fjellstad family's conversion illustrated the specific adaptations required for households with multiple sleepers and limited space. Betsy Fjellstad requested modifications that would accommodate both adult and child sleeping while maintaining the thermal advantages Hartman had demonstrated. His solution involved creating a tiered alcove system with the adult sleeping platform positioned at standard 18-inch elevation, while a child section extended at 12-inch height, where slightly cooler temperatures would prevent overheating of smaller bodies with higher metabolic rates per pound of body weight. Word of these successful retrofits spread along established communication networks that connected scattered homesteads across the territory. Freight haulers carrying supplies between river settlements began carrying detailed sketches and measurement specifications that Hartman provided to ensure accurate replication. Mail carriers, who often stayed overnight at homesteads along their routes, observed functioning warm corner installations and carried first-hand accounts to families who lacked direct contact with Hartman's immediate community. McKendry's eventual conversion required addressing his specific concerns about emergency egress from an enclosed sleeping space, fears rooted in his experience with house fires that had killed entire families trapped in upper-story rooms. Hartman modified the standard alcove design to include a quick-release mechanism for the optional upper panel, using leather hinges with pull tabs that allowed instant opening even in complete darkness. He also specified wider gaps at the alcove's base to ensure adequate air circulation and provide alternative exit routes during emergency situations. The technique's expansion into established settlements like Huron and De Smet demanded adaptations for larger, multi-room cabins where chimney placement and room layouts differed from single-pen homestead structures. Hartman developed scaling guidelines that accounted for room volume, ceiling height, and multiple heat sources, creating formulas that determined optimal sleeping positions relative to thermal mass regardless of overall cabin size. These calculations proved essential, as the method spread to merchant families and town professionals who built more elaborate structures than typical frontier claims. Railroad construction crews and section house supervisors adopted simplified versions of Hartman's principles for temporary shelter construction along the Northern Pacific Corridor. Line foremen discovered that positioning bunk beds adjacent to central heating stoves with windbreaks fashioned from canvas and scrap lumber dramatically reduced fuel consumption in crew quarters while improving worker comfort during the grueling schedule of track laying and maintenance. This application demonstrated how the underlying physics worked across different building scales and construction methods. Itinerant carpenters proved instrumental in codifying Hartman's innovations into repeatable construction standards that could be taught to local builders throughout the territory. These craftsmen, who traveled regular circuits servicing multiple communities, developed standardized material lists and cutting patterns that ensured consistent results regardless of local lumber dimensions or tool availability. They established measurement protocols using common objects: a man's stretched arm for platform width, boot length for chimney clearance, that eliminated the need for precision instruments while maintaining functional accuracy. The transformation of individual technique into regional practice accelerated during the settlement surge of the early 1880s, when railroad promotion and federal land policies brought thousands of new homesteaders into Dakota Territory. Experienced settlers found themselves serving as unofficial advisors to arriving families, and Hartman's warm corner method became standard guidance offered alongside recommendations for well digging, crop selection, and livestock management. County agricultural extension agents, a new innovation of the period, began including thermal comfort principles in their formal homesteading courses. Documentation of the method's effectiveness spread through multiple channels that reinforced its credibility and encouraged adoption. Local newspapers published letters from settlers who had successfully implemented the technique, providing quantitative data on fuel savings and comfort improvements that convinced skeptical readers. Territorial officials investigating winter mortality rates noted significantly lower death rates in districts where warm corner installations had become common, lending governmental authority to what had originated as one-man systematic experimentation. The legacy extended beyond immediate practical applications to influence broader understanding of building science principles on the frontier. Hartman's emphasis on measurement and systematic observation encouraged other settlers to apply scientific methods to agricultural and construction challenges, creating a culture of innovation that distinguished Dakota Territory's development from more traditional settlement patterns. His documentation techniques, particularly the use of comparative temperature logging and fuel consumption tracking, became standard practice for evaluating any proposed improvements to frontier building methods. By 1885, the warm corner approach had evolved from a single homesteader solution into established regional wisdom that newcomers received as basic instruction rather than experimental innovation. The transformation from curiosity to convention demonstrated how effective techniques, when properly documented and systematically taught, could reshape entire communities' approach to fundamental challenges like heating efficiency and human comfort during extreme weather conditions.